What is up, everyone, and welcome to Drop In, where we have open, authentic conversations about all things mental health, including the best interventions for anxiety. Dr. Jackie, what up?
I'm excited. I feel like we haven't done this in like way too long.
Time is flying by at the end of the year.
So weird.
So weird. And yet, anxiety, something we all experience? Question mark.
Yes. I feel like that's so important to talk about, is that anxiety is such a normal human experience that all of us experience as an emotion, which is protective, right? Like it helps us assess danger, assess threat, assess situations that maybe our bodies are trying to tell us something or give us clues to. So I think anxiety in general is a very normal human experience and emotion. It's just to what degree you're experiencing that.
Yeah, it makes me think of like, is there anybody out there who would say, no, I've never experienced anxiety? I don't think so.
I don't think
That
so.
would actually be more fascinating to me if there was, because I agree. It's like anxiety is often the alarm bells sort of going off that we need for threat detection. But the difference between, you know, someone experiencing that once in a while versus someone who experiences it, you know, all day, every day, or at a high frequency.
Right. Which is interesting because when I think about anxiety, I think about it kind of on a continuum, right? Because I think there are some people who have lower levels of like trait anxiety and some people who have higher levels of anxiety, but that might not be diagnostic per se. But I think there's just variations from like person to person about what level of anxiety or how frequently you experience that emotion, depending on genetics, depending on the environments that you're in, depending on the settings or the chapter of life that you're in.
Yeah, even personality can play a role in there. And, you know, we're going to talk about anxiety kind of generally. You know, we're not talking specifically about you meet criteria for generalized anxiety disorder, which is, you know, people who experience worry, you know, most days than not, frequently throughout the day. And the worry is kind of moving through many different areas in their life.
Yeah.
But we're going to talk in general about when someone comes to your office as a therapist and they're like, this anxiety, it's, you know, really bothering me. What do I do about this?
Yeah.
Where do you get pulled?
So the first thing that I usually talk through is a lot of curious questions, right? I ask a lot of things about, when have you experienced this before? When did this start for you that it's either gotten more intense, more frequent? Have there been any changes in your life around that time period? I get curious about if this is normal for you to experience higher levels of anxiety pretty frequently, or if this comes in waves or patterns, or if there are certain people or settings or situations that tend to bring that up more than others. And I get curious about the health side of things, right? Like, when have you recently had blood work done? Are there potential medical things or deficiencies going on that might be causing some of that uptick? So the first thing that I always do is get super curious about what's going on for you.
You got to turn over a lot of stones to see, because the difference between, you know, a client saying, I've felt this way since second grade.
Right.
Or someone saying, I started feeling this way 2 months ago when my partner said to me they don't really feel the same love in the relationship that they used to. Those are very different poles of what you do next,
right?
Sort of as a therapist.
Yeah, and I think that very much directs the treatment or the interventions, right? Because if someone is coming in that they're going through menopause or they're going through, changes in diet or differences in terms of their medical history. Even hyperthyroidism is one of the big ones that can also cause anxiety and anxious feelings. So, if there's something medical that's going on that's kind of causing some of these feelings, all right, then the intervention is going to be more medically focused, right? Versus someone who has been experiencing anxiety their entire life. Okay, we're going to choose a different treatment method based on that, or someone who has maybe more situational anxiety or something that has kind of come out of the blue for them or more recently.
So the get to the source is always so helpful.
Yes.
Especially when it comes to anxiety, like you had named. Is this something situational? Is it related to a relationship, work? Is it related to the political climate? And again, it sort of has a starting point after this event occurred versus, again, the people who you're like, I felt anxious for about as long as I can remember.
It's so interesting how people describe this for themselves too, right? Because like I personally wouldn't describe myself as an anxious person, quote unquote.
Mm-hmm.
Have I experienced anxiety? Oh, hell yeah. Have I
Right.
experienced panic attacks? Absolutely. But I wouldn't necessarily describe myself as an anxious person. Um, but I'll have people that come in that some will describe themselves as an anxious person and kind of relate to that as almost part of their identity or their personality. And then sometimes you'll have people who come in and they're like, I have never really experienced this before. And now I'm experiencing this thing that feels super foreign to me and it feels bad.
Mm-hmm.
Like I need to get rid of this. It's got to go away. What the hell is going on here? So I think it's also interesting how people can kind of describe themselves or describe the anxiety and what that means to them as well.
Yeah, I agree. Because I would say I've gone through seasons of anxiety,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not sort of a consistent trait that I have had throughout my life.
Right.
But depending on my home environment, for a few years growing up, or for many
Mm-hmm.
years growing up with my dad's cancer and my brother, struggling so much, I was very anxious through that chapter. Then I went to
Mm-hmm.
like undergrad and didn't feel as anxious. And it's like, so you sort of track as like, oh, how the environment and the family is impacting you
Mm-hmm.
versus, yeah, I agree with you, like aging, phase of life, work. But we'll get into sort of the more general interventions we do, but this conversation is so important and why psychotherapy is so nuanced.
Mm-hmm.
Because if someone comes to you and you're just like, oh, you're anxious, again, we're going to talk about mindfulness and meditation and how helpful it is, but it might not be getting to the source of
Mm-hmm.
sort of understanding, oh, this is really about your work environment,
Right.
or this is really a relational issue
Mm-hmm.
at the source. Again, versus someone maybe that they're like, this sounds very biological. When someone tells me that they can remember being consistently anxious,
Mm-hmm.
since second grade and they're, 27 years old.
Right. Which I think is why it's so important to highlight some of these differences because therapy is not a one size fits all.
Yeah, it can't be. And it never will be.
Even if someone is coming in with anxiety, right? Even the interventions for anxiety are not a one size fits all. What works for one person might not work the best for someone else.
So this whole episode is just BS, is what you're saying. We're talking about the best interventions for anxiety, and you're like, it's all BS.
What I'm saying is there are a lot of options. So there is never a finite supply of different things that you can try for anxiety.
Absolutely. And I'll take that and start off by naming an intervention I think of a lot,
Mm-hmm.
which it might surprise people we're starting here, but it's movement.
Yes.
Uh, we have become stagnant as a species
Mm-hmm.
because of technology. we could blame infrastructure, especially in the United States. It's very car dependent.
Mm-hmm.
We don't live in walkable towns or cities. I think there's very few in the United States
Yeah.
that are truly that way. There are some,
Sure.
but movement is an essential piece of regulation of being human.
Mm-hmm.
And we do far less of it maybe than we ever had.
Right.
What do you notice when you're sort of like evaluating, someone's talking through their life? What do you ask? What do you look for as far as movement is concerned?
Yeah, I ask a lot about lifestyle and what your day to day looks like. One of the things that also kind of piggybacks off of that and kind of goes hand in hand is what is your caffeine intake, right? Like, what are you eating? What are you drinking? Are you drinking any water? Or are you just chugging coffees and Red Bulls all day long? And your body is just reacting naturally to some of those things, right? So, I ask a lot about lifestyle, what your movement looks like, not necessarily always exercise, but what movement are you doing? Because sometimes people don't classify walking or certain things that they're doing, whether that's cleaning or, running around after the kids as exercise, but it actually is a form of that. So I talk a lot about movement, what that looks like, and really what your day to day looks like. Because if you are kind of like we're talking about working on a computer or you're very car oriented as opposed to being able to walk or get outside, depending on, again, what you're doing for work or school or where you're living. There's a lot of things that can vary in terms of that.
And you try to build insight, meaning I'll ask them to talk about a time maybe they had more movement in a
Mm-hmm.
chapter in their life. How did you feel then?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, now you took this remote job and you're mostly at home. You don't have to go anywhere. How has that impacted your movement? How do you feel with that? Because it's rare someone will report feeling better with less movement.
Right.
And again, it's just off of our biology. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm with you. It totally doesn't have to be of like, I'm doing the latest and greatest CrossFit trend thing. It doesn't have to be that.
Right.
But as far as releasing tension, stress, and we know reducing anxiety, movement is going to play a big role.
Totally.
And as you had mentioned, caffeine intake. So it's sort of like energy flowing out,
Mm-hmm.
expressing versus the things you do that we know bump you into these, sympathetic
Right.
fight or flight states.
Mm-hmm.
And not everybody feels that when they drink one Red Bull, but we know a stimulant is hyping you up.
Totally.
It's always amazing when you get a client that when they reduce or get curious about their caffeine intake, and all of a sudden those anxiety symptoms just like dissipate.
Dissipate. Yeah. I know. And it's always interesting because I know we've been having this conversation a lot lately, um, because even if you are someone who has coffee every single day, all of a sudden you might have different reactions to it. And so there's some of those curiosities there of let's experiment a little bit. Let's see how you're feeling at different points of the day. What if we move that first cup of coffee to an hour from wake up as opposed to 5 minutes after wake up and see how you feel that first hour and then, kind of go from there.
Substituting anything else like water. Yeah, I'm going through this right now. I'm
Mm-hmm.
posting about this all over my social media of like out of nowhere, my body has just decided like I cannot drink coffee.
Yeah.
I drink coffee every single morning,
Yep.
not always immediately when I wake up, but pretty soon, probably in an hour after I
Mm-hmm.
wake up. I did this every morning for I don't even know how many years now. Probably 10 years.
Yeah.
I haven't always drank coffee. I'm not someone who was like drinking coffee at 20. But since I was 30, I probably started drinking 1 cup, 2 max a day, every day. And out of nowhere, for the last like 2.5, 3 weeks, immediate heart palpitations.
Yeah.
Like my body has just decided this is no more.
Right.
No matter what kind of coffee I have or whatever, it's like I cannot. So I've been reducing my caffeine intake significantly, and it's made a big difference. I'm not loving it over here. We're
Yeah.
not ba 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 ba. I'm like at all. But it was validating when I posted that on social media. The amount of people that like, yo, I went through that too. Something happened when I turned 35. My body just decided not to. But
Mhm.
yeah, that wasn't typical. I used to be able to have a cup of coffee and felt all the positive effects. Maybe I had a little too much every now and then, but um, it felt great. But
Right.
now my body's changing and saying we don't want this anymore.
Which is why it's always so interesting, and why I always get curious about the physical side of things because our bodies can just randomly out of the clear blue decide, okay, coffee or stimulants or a certain food that we've been eating every single day, your body just decides, no, I'm not into this anymore. And it'll have these very like physical reactions to it, which can be confused for anxiety or
Mhm.
feel like anxiety. And it's actually an intolerance that your body is experiencing. And that's the physical symptom of it. So it's always, again, like that curiosity of are there certain things that if we change this factor or this variable, does that change
Right.
the anxiety or the way that you're feeling?
Yeah. This is where bridging into sleep, another big factor.
Hmm.
And this is why assessing everything, it's like you'll have clients who report like, yeah, I usually get about 4 hours of sleep a night.
Hmm.
It's never been a problem.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, understandable, understandable. Try not to immediately,
That was literally me through most of grad school and postdoc.
but things can work until they don't work.
Absolutely.
And aging and situations can impact that. But it's also hard when something is your norm,
Hmm.
but it could definitely be contributing.
Totally.
Of like, yes, the research is very clear. Even the difference between 6 hours and 7 hours is a big difference as far as the research is concerned of outcomes and longevity and lots of things. It's like we are programmed once again that we need this sort of threshold of 7 hours.
Right.
And of course, there can always be individual differences. But if you're telling me you're getting 4 hours, my alarm bells are going off as a therapist
Right.
of like, why is that? And what can we do to improve your sleep?
Hmm.
What other sort of realms come to mind?
I guess kind of on that similar like physical side of things, I think also about supplements and medications that people are taking too, even if they're not necessarily for mental health, can definitely have either side effects or impact. Um, and supplements, there are also really great evidence based supplements that can be helpful for reducing anxiety and cortisol levels. I know we talk about this a lot. Ashwagandha is a really great one that has great evidence for reducing cortisol and improving stress levels. L-theanine, I think, is another one. I'm trying to think of what else. I feel like there's at least one more.
Those are the two that mainly jump out that I feel like when you look at the data and you look at the research, there's evidence there. You can
Mm-hmm.
always say like we need more. And again, especially the question of like what level of evidence do you personally need to
Mm-hmm.
try something that has been shown to have few side effects? Again, you got to ask yourself that. You can always consult with your medical doctor,
Mm-hmm.
um, to be sure. But it does feel like a personal thing because for me, the threshold is like, yeah, if there's enough published research out there, like I read it, I look at it, and I'm like, yeah, it was helpful in this randomized control trial. I'm an experimental for myself, but I also need enough evidence that I can point to recommend it to, um, my clients.
Right. And I think especially for the clients who might have concerns about trying like an SSRI or any kind of like medication that is prescription, some people feel more comfortable with supplements or trying something like that first because it feels more natural for them. So if that is the case for someone, that's usually the research that I'll point to. if they wanted to try something that feels more natural to them prior to potentially seeking out prescription medication. But that's just another one that comes to mind in terms of like the physical realm.
Yeah, and again, prescription medication has plenty of research, decades and decades worth to support its use. So you certainly don't want to project that natural is sort of better.
No,
It's an
not by any
individual
means.
difference thing.
Right, absolutely. And some, again, like some people have certain concerns or their own feelings about that. And so obviously, I'm someone who I'm not going to push anything on someone. Like if you are not feeling comfortable with medications, I'm not going to tell you that you need to take a medication. So to each their own, whatever you feel most comfortable with is, obviously a route to explore for sure.
The thing I get pulled towards, of course, as a mindfulness practitioner
Mm-hmm.
and doing my research on that is, what are you doing to pull yourself into the present moment?
Yes.
You know, mindfulness practices are just that, things that pull you into the present. Why that's important is anxiety wants you living in your amygdala, living in fight or flight, and constantly worrying and detecting threats
Mm-hmm.
of like perpetual anxiety.
Right.
Mindfulness practices are the opposite. It's noticing what is occurring in the here and now and trying to keep your focus on that for a time limited thing. Could be your breath. You could do a body scan, could be sensations throughout the body, could be smells, could be sights, could be sounds, could be so many different things. But we know when you intentionally meditate on something and hold focus for the best you can, none of us are perfect at this. Your mind will drift off. You get far more activation in the frontal lobe and far less activation in the amygdala, in these areas that are big culprits for anxiety. Very effective. Lots of meta-analysis on this.
Yes.
But, and I don't know how you are. I'm often like, there's plenty of mindfulness meditations out there. I'm like, if it's your jive, it's my jive. I think it's great. But
Mm-hmm.
I'll ask clients specifically, what are the things you do where you're present in them?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I think it kind of depends again on the client and what they feel most comfortable with. And a lot of times people will have reactions to meditation or mindfulness one way or another, right? It might
Sure.
be love this, this is totally my vibe. And some people are like, the thought of doing that makes me, want to just cry. And I'm like, okay, cool. Let's figure out a way that we can channel some of that present moment focus. And sometimes that is engaging in an activity that you're really present in, right? Like maybe doing gardening or something outside that you are putting your full focus into, or we're trying to find ways that we can channel all of our sensory inputs,
Pets.
pets, being able to just be in the present moment intentionally, even if it's just for a few minutes. And the research is absolutely huge when it comes to even taking 3 minutes of mindfulness breaks throughout the course of your day, even if it's, one or two breaks throughout the course of your day, it actually helps to regulate the nervous system and to bring you back down to baseline in those moments. So that way it doesn't keep compounding throughout the course of the day.
Totally. And so that's mindfulness is about focusing on sensations in the present moment, seeing
Mm-hmm.
what arises, just observing. Deep breathing works,
Mm-hmm.
very effective because we know it's a shortcut to activate the parasympathetic, the rest and digest system.
Yes.
It's not always easy to do in the midst of a panic attack,
Mm-hmm.
which is totally valid. But throughout your day, regulating your breath, slowing the exhales down
Mm-hmm.
helps. Take deeper inhales in. And we know if you can concentrate on filling the air to the very base of your lungs, there's so many neurons that innervate and activate the parasympathetic. And we know, especially when you're really anxious, if you say, "Where is my breath?" most of us are breathing very short and shallow in the throat.
Mm-hmm.
then if you picture yourself, in a relaxing space, nice fall day outside with your cup of coffee. I hope you enjoy it. Must be nice. Some of us can't drink coffee anymore. But anyways, back to the scenescape of the fall leaves are falling and you're just rocking in the chair, holding your nice warm beverage. That breath is no longer in the throat. You're slowing it down. You're
You really
deepening
need
it.
to like start making ASMR videos.
I don't think anybody wants to hear my voice, baby. Very kind of you to say, but no, I've worked hard on trying to activate the meditation voice over
Did
the
they
years.
teach you that in yoga teacher training?
No, I feel like they taught me that when I went for the mindfulness certification.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, oh, for sure. How do you slow down your breath and
Mhm.
breathing, while you're communicating or leading someone in an exercise? Oh, for sure. Can you imagine the opposite? Me talking like this while you're trying to take a deep breath, like talking a mile a minute, maybe how I normally do. That's not regulating at
That's like
all.
New Yorker ASMR.
Yeah, oh my gosh. Subway sounds in the background. I'm walking.
Just like cars honking in the background.
That might be, it's funny when I used to teach, these mindfulness stress reduction courses at the university. I would play natural audios that you could just get on YouTube or wherever. And I always mixed in cityscape. And I always found it fascinating. For a lot of people, they felt like, no, like, oh my God, when you played that, I felt tense. I felt whatever. There are always some people who grew up in a city who felt like home.
Yep.
I'm listening to cars honk. I'm listening to the sounds of the street, screeching tires, beep, beep, all these things, people talking as they walk by.
Yeah.
And they were like,
Sirens going.
no, I felt like home. God. That was always fascinating to me because I'm like, yeah, it's what you imagine in those moments. And it was in that mindful listening exercise, it's less about how you feel and more of what you notice. But it was always interesting when people would pair it of like, I actually felt a little more relaxed than that.
That's so funny. I bet that would be me.
Yeah, it would be you. Like, why do I want to order a pizza slice right now?
Yeah, you're like, for some reason, I'm craving pizza and penne alla vodka.
Probably all the time for you, but the cognitive aspect, I don't think either one of us identify as a cognitive behavioral therapist,
Yeah,
but
not primarily.
I often argue of like, it's going to be hard pressed to find a therapist who does no cognitive work
Right.
because cognition gets, brought up in all these things of like, what thoughts are coming to mind? What are you telling yourself? This and that.
Right.
When you think of the cognitive side of the interventions for anxiety, what do you think of?
I think a lot about reality checking and testing, and assessing probability of some of these things,
Mm,
right? So one of the things that I like to talk through when it comes to like the cognitive side is our brains were built to keep us safe. They weren't built to keep us happy. They were built to keep us safe. So they're really good at doing that. And that's where a lot of our anxiety gets triggered, right? Because we're assessing threat all the time. And some of our brains are really good at this, whereas other people might not be quite as in touch with those types of things. But one of the things that can be really helpful is in those moments that the anxiety does kind of spike, recognizing that that's happening, saying thank you to your brain for trying to keep you safe, and reframing, allowing yourself to say, like, I'm actually safe in this moment, and recognizing what's going on around you, kind of bringing in some of those mindfulness pieces at that time, having the awareness enough to be intentional in those ways, but also being able to check in and ask yourself, what is it that I am worried about? What is it that might happen or that my brain is telling me might happen in this moment? And then kind of going through what's the likelihood that that will happen, And it's probably lower than what your brain immediately is responding to acutely. And as you work through that, even thinking about, okay, and if that did happen, right, then what? What would happen if that
Mm.
thing did happen, if I did fail that test? Okay, well, then I'd probably have to study harder for the next one, or I'd have to talk to my professor about it, or, do some sort of makeup work or whatever it is, right? So, a lot of times, because our brains are trying to keep us safe, they overestimate the potential threat. And it's, again, doing that for protection, but being able to really kind of zoom in sometimes and ask ourselves, what's the likelihood of this thing that I'm worrying about actually happening? And if that does happen, okay, then what?
Yeah, as you say that, I think of, building evidence for something, evidence against something. I also think of like sometimes when you allow, sort of the client to express the full catastrophe of what
Mm-hmm.
their mind says, you sort of ask, would I survive that? Again, none of these interventions work for everything,
Sure.
but they can be helpful for some things. I also thought you had mentioned something that made me think of like the metacognition. This is what I do more probably than any other cognitive thing, which is labeling it of like, oh, I'm having an anxious thought right now.
Mm-hmm.
And this works for some people. It really works for me.
Yeah.
But it definitely works for some people because it allows you to be like, I understand and recognize that that is an anxious thought.
Mm-hmm.
Further spiraling into it really doesn't have much validity, because if it were to happen, I can't do much to prevent it. Right now, it's certainly having an impact on me. And if you can like create the distance with I'm having the anxious thought, the next thought is what would be better for me right now?
Right.
Because if I can get you doing anything else but the anxiety spiral, I'm taking whatever you thought of.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I'll go for a drive. Maybe I'll call a friend. Maybe I'll boot up this video game. Maybe I'll whatever it might be.
Absolutely. And I think being able to have a tool in those moments oftentimes gives people control or a feeling of
Hmm.
control. And anxiety, more times than not, is very closely linked to this feeling of wanting control or feeling like you don't have control in any given moment. And so, if there are tools that you can have in your tool belt that make you feel like you have more control in those moments, usually that helps to reduce some of that intensity of the anxiety.
Some people journal, text
Mhm.
a friend, naming what those tools would actually be for someone. They play their music. They do things to pivot out of that anxiety spiral. I've also, always liked the act, like overall, like frame of
Mm,
things.
urge surfing.
Urge surfing and sort of pivoting to, if I'm labeling this as anxiety and I can get to that point of like, I know this is an anxious thought I'm having.
Mhm.
It's then the next step of like, and how does anything I'm doing align with my values?
Right.
And like most of the time, vast majority, it's like anxiety is not leading you towards your values of what you actually want in your life. As you said, it's trying to keep us safe. But if you lean towards like, okay, if I was living a values based life, what would I do in this moment?
Right. Because a lot of times, another piece that goes hand in hand with anxiety is avoidance, right?
Absolutely.
So, what ends up being the result of anxiety and kind of keeps the system perpetuating is we can often avoid something that feels anxiety provoking or feels scary in some way. And in the immediate moment, sometimes that feels relieving. But what ends up happening is that actually further perpetuates the anxiety and builds it even more for future moments of anxiety. So a lot of what you're kind of talking about too, living in accordance with your values, is kind of being able to check yourself and say, okay, well, is the anxiety that I'm feeling getting in the way of me being able to live according to my values and live in the way that I want to, because I'm avoiding something or because I'm making decisions based off of this emotion as opposed to what I actually want to be doing.
Absolutely. And it takes the labeling, it takes the recognition.
Mm.
And again, some people think that's easy. It's not easy.
No.
It's not easy to build that in because again, for many people, it's like you're 15, 20 minutes, 2 hours into an anxiety spiral.
Mm.
But again, if you can early on be like, man, this what if I'm playing in my head, it sounds a lot like anxiety. Where is this going to lead me? What is better for me again in this moment?
Right.
That's where I'm with you. Like the behavioral activation comes to mind of like, what else could I be doing? Something we didn't talk about yet that again is a huge implication is social connection
Yes.
of like most things. And again, there's always the individual difference where and I have seen this where some, like the minority of people, they could get in these routines of spiraling in their anxiety with someone.
Mhm.
But for most people, it's the opposite. If you can talk it out loud with someone and you can absorb someone else's thoughts, perspective, or just holding space, it can allow you to move on or
Yes.
pivot from.
Mhm. Yeah, oftentimes talking through the feelings or the thoughts that you're having with someone and just even using them as a sounding board in those moments can be so helpful. And just human connection and hearing someone else's voice can also be regulating in a completely different way.
Absolutely. I would have anybody reflect of think about the times you're most anxious. Where are you? What are you doing? Who are you with? I think a lot of people picture themselves in a familiar space by themselves doing almost nothing.
Mhm.
Again, not everyone, of course, you might be like, I'm at work and I'm in a meeting, valid.
Right.
But I think even that reflection draws like when you're having your most anxiety, if you could paint a picture of what that looks like, I can paint a picture as your therapist of what you may need.
Right. And for those people that have social anxiety, obviously that picture might be a bit
Of
different.
course.
And those are, again, that targets then the interventions in that way. But I agree wholeheartedly. Like, I think having more of that social connection and more of that community, there's a certain comfort in having connection, in having support in those moments that just feels regulating, safe.
Releasing, and again, it's not just in your head.
Mhm.
And it's not to say your friend has to be your therapist or whatever, but I think all of us have had the example where it's like even at work, something's bothering you and you go talk to a coworker about it and they're like, "Oh yeah, me too. I sometimes worry about that and I don't like those meetings." There's something connecting about that. You're like, "Oh, it's not just me."
Right.
But we minimize that impact often. You can be like, "Oh, what difference would it make if I go actually talk to my coworker about this?"
Mhm. And even in terms of it's very easy to continue to work yourself up in your own head,
Oh yeah.
right? Like, I know even for myself, if I'm frustrated or I'm overwhelmed by something and I start spinning about it in my head, I end up making it 20 times bigger than it originally was because I'm giving it so much energy and I'm thinking through every aspect of everything. Whereas if I were to just talk to you about something, I would feel so much better because it actually ends up stopping that spiral from continuing to grow. And even if it remains at that same level but doesn't grow, I would say that's still a hell of a lot better than it intensifying.
For sure. I'm constantly amazed that how I'll feel like when I'm getting anxious or worried about something, how I'll feel after like a 10-minute lap around our neighborhood.
Yes.
I'm constantly amazed by that.
That is one of the best tools that I give to everyone as a life hack. Anytime you are feeling anxious or overwhelmed, if you can, go for a walk and see how you feel 10 minutes later.
And even as you say that, I know it's true. I'm always shocked of how well it works.
Yes.
Like shockingly so.
Mhm.
So if you're out there and you're like, oh, how much of a difference will it really make? But I see people make the videos of like going on this stupid mental health walk as my stupid therapist, blah, blah, blah. But it's just like annoyingly effective. And
It
again,
is.
individual, but like,
And I think there's multiple reasons for it, right? One, you're getting outside, you're getting sunlight, you're getting vitamin D, you're getting a change in perspective because you're moving, you're getting the endorphins of exercise. And another huge piece that we haven't really dove into yet is vagus nerve stimulation. One of the most effective ways to stimulate your vagus nerve, which is attached to the parasympathetic nervous system and kind of controls that, is bilateral stimulation. So sometimes you'll hear like the TikTok videos or things like that that go from one ear to the next and it's kind of panning. Um, Walking, because you're using both sides of your body, you're doing right step, left step, right step, left step, is bilateral stimulation. It's channeling and stimulating your vagus nerve, which activates your parasympathetic nervous system. Isn't that crazy?
it makes so much sense. It really does. And I think sometimes, even if you don't know the biology behind the why, it's about experimenting with what is impactful for you.
Mm-hmm.
And I have clients where it's like in the experimentation, they found like, oh, for me, it's doing my artwork.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm very physically stagnant, just focusing on this line, this shading. And that also makes sense to me. Your world is closed in, you're focused just on this thing.
Yep.
For me, I don't think, no, number one, I'm not a great artist, but I often need to express through my body, through movement, through change of my visual cortex in scenery.
Mm-hmm.
I know damn well if I'm confined in a room for too long, this office room, I can get stagnant in my thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I just need to change up my scenery. And this has been shown of like green spaces, things you're into, artwork. Some people are into architecture. These things have been shown of like, yeah, it helps change your thinking patterns.
Totally. Which is part of the reason that I go for my mental health drives, going and looking at different things, changing up the visual cortex for sure.
Are there other, even non-traditional things that you think of or you've seen to be helpful within helping with this thing, anxiety that we all experience from time to time?
Yeah, I think especially having some of the fast acting tools in your tool belt for moments of like acute or intense anxiety or panic attacks. Um, that's something that I've found very helpful for a lot of clients so that they again like feel a sense of control if and when it does feel too overwhelming or they feel like they need an immediate fix or an immediate like reduction in that intensity of anxiety. So some of the things that I often give in their tool belt, and I have them list this in the notes in their phones so that way they always have that like on deck. Deep breathing, like we talked about, because it immediately will activate the parasympathetic nervous system, will override even the worst panic attack. Walking, always. Listening to music or bilateral stimulation music. You can look that up and find different audios for that. But any kind of music can be helpful, or even listening to a guided meditation, a guided audio or visualization, something to that effect, even jumping up and down, something that's physical that will get some of that energy out in an immediate moment. You can do jumping jacks. You can literally just jump up and down if you're able. But that's another physical way to just kind of release some of the pent up energy and get that moving. So those are kind of like top 5 that I typically will give someone to have as immediate kind of decompressing, fast acting, 5 minutes or less type of tools.
I think those things are so helpful. I know it made me think of a study that I heard of, yeah, just last year where they had people, a group of people walk upstairs and they had another group of people run up the stairs. And then they tracked them like up to 5 and 6 hours later of like stress levels and all this stuff. The group that ran up the stairs had significantly like more improved like regulation.
So
And I
wild.
cite that not to tell people to start running up the stairs, but I'm like, it is interesting. Like the smallest interventions can have such a ripple effect. Because
Yes.
if you would ask me that on the front end of like, these people are going to walk up 20 stairs, the other group's going to run up 20 stairs, and that's the only intervention, I don't know that I would predict there'd be much difference hours later.
It's so fascinating because there's even been studies of like drinking cold water periodically that can reduce anxiety. So even something that small, right, of put an alarm in your phone if you think that you're going to forget or if you need like that reminder, aka me. Um, but even doing something that's so small that seemingly insignificant can have such a lasting impact. And so sometimes, it sounds so minimal to do some of these things, or even like, putting an alarm in your phone to pause throughout the day, even if it's one time, and take a few deep breaths, for 1 minute or 10 deep breaths. And that has a lasting impact on the rest of your day. Like that little mini intervention or consistency or daily habit that you can build can actually reduce your baseline levels of anxiety so it doesn't get to the level 10 kind of volcano explosion intensity, because we're bringing it back down periodically and we're doing these things to regulate throughout the course of the day to bring us back down to baseline.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's so important. And that is sort of the differences when you see someone, further along the path in managing anxiety is they'll come to these like daily things that they know they need to do.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and even if you have a day that goes by that you didn't, you're like, okay, well, definitely tomorrow. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I need to talk to someone. I was kind of isolated yesterday. I need to do my artwork. I only did stressful things. I didn't move my body. I better incorporate. Like, there's just a knowing because you start to track how the body, how your anxiety feels on a day to day basis, and what you have learned sort of can move that needle up and down.
Right.
But that it takes time. It takes experimenting. And again, when someone walks through our door, we don't know right away.
Right.
I don't know immediately right away. I could speak in general of like, are you getting your daily movement? Are you getting enough sleep? Are you watching stimulants, caffeine, not doing stimulant drugs? Do we have some healthy relationships? If everybody, according to research, meditated every day, all these things I can know in general, but the specifics for you, I can't know.
Right. And a lot of times it does take some trial and error. It does take
Absolutely.
experimentation. And that's something that I like to talk about at the beginning of the therapy journey too, is there is some discomfort in sitting in these emotions and sitting in the anxiety and being able to experiment with new things and test out new tools to see what works best for you. And having that feedback from the experiments that you're doing. I tell clients all the time, like, I want to know if something was helpful for you. Great, let me know, because we'll go and continue down that path of finding either more of those same or similar physical types of interventions or cognitive interventions or things like that, and vice versa, right? If something doesn't really fit for you or doesn't really have much of an impact on the intensity of the anxiety after experimenting with something, or it doesn't have much of an impact in a positive way or makes it worse or whatever. I want to know that because then we can pivot and find a different type of intervention that
Yeah.
can be helpful.
Yeah, I think the bias that exists often about therapists is like I think a lot of us make content in either areas we have expertise or stuff that's interesting to us. Maybe personally they work for us, but that doesn't mean that we feel like, oh, if you're not meditating, you're not doing enough. Like I don't feel that way at all. But it's different, especially with content creation. Like I make a lot of stuff within that expertise because it's what I know. But if tomorrow you came to me and you're like, you know what really changed my anxiety? My cat. I'd be like, I believe it.
Yeah.
Yep, I got this cat. I pet it every day. Its purring regulates me. I'm just concentrating on it when I'm playing with it. And I guess some cats fetch.
Yeah.
I was like, when I was doing the throw the ball motion, some do fetch. But you know what I'm saying? Like, I'd be like, I believe it.
Yeah.
100%. But that's why this whole field and of understanding and experimenting what works for you, it's always going to be individualized. And that's the fun part.
Yeah.
Of like we get to explore and yeah, sometimes your bodies change and you can't have caffeine anymore. I don't know how many times I'm going to complain about that for the next 100 episodes.
Honestly valid though. I'd be
It's been
pissed.
hard. I'm going through all the stages of grief over here, but it is getting easier. And I do think that's just part of life. And anxiety, unfortunately, often doesn't want us to experiment.
Right.
It wants us to limit our world,
Mhm.
pull in, and our job, especially as therapists, is help people expand the world,
Right.
help them lean into, curiosity and openness and flexibility. And anxiety doesn't want you to do any of those things.
Right. And sometimes it's helpful practicing those things even in session, right? And being able to explore that with your therapist and be able to do some of those things that might feel really scary to do or experiment with on your own, and being able to do that in a safe environment that feels like you're guided by your therapist or supported by your therapist can be helpful in terms of easing into that experimentation and also knowing what's normal, right? It's normal that this feels uncomfortable and it's very much expected that that feels uncomfortable. And that doesn't mean that it's not working. That doesn't mean that it's bad. It just means, yeah, this is new and new feels uncomfortable, but new might also get us different results.
Yeah, I always try to explain to people, I'm like, the first time you go do anything, like, fine. The only thing coming to my mind is like group fitness. First time you go to group fitness, you're interested in it, I'd like to do it. Your anxiety is going to peak. It's
Mm-hmm.
going to spike.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I've never been here before. What if these people don't like me? What if I'm not good at it? All these things. The first time we see the anxiety spike, second time, lower, third time, lower,
Yep.
fourth time. And that's the nature of most anxiety interventions. Even the first time someone meditates,
Mhm.
anxiety is going to go up. It's new, it's different. But as to your point, if people don't know that, they're going to think I'm doing this wrong.
Right.
You think the very first time you go for a walk around your neighborhood that you're immediately going to have less anxiety? I think it's going to go up first.
Yeah. And often it does. And again, those are things that we very much want to normalize, especially if you're trying a new intervention, whether it's on your own or in therapy. It does feel uncomfortable. It does feel anxiety provoking the first time to do something new or to experiment with a different intervention. And I would always recommend that you try it one more time and see if you still feel that way or if things feel a little bit different. And if things still feel that way, okay, let's try a new one. Let's see a totally different approach and see maybe if that one fits better for you. But there's always an endless supply of interventions and tools. And a lot of times we find those by experimenting.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's only so much we can know from one data point.
Right.
And I try to prep people on that on the front end
Mhm.
of like, even on first dates, this isn't a dating episode, But I do, to a degree, feel that way
Mhm.
of like, it's a data point. And again, sometimes the one data point sometimes can certainly be enough. But especially with this conversation around anxiety and experimenting, like you want to keep that in mind of like, yeah, I might not feel completely great, comfortable, or the benefits of this off of one data point.
Mhm.
Might need to go down the road and assess more how we feel and reflect on it.
You think?
We love good reflection.
Should we go for a walk?
Yeah, we need it. We definitely need it. It's been a day already.
After having that conversation, I'm like, okay, we need to build in some of these things even for ourselves.
It's going to be hot out there. 80 some degrees in South Florida in our winter months, but who cares? Get a little sunlight, watch the iguanas. Hey, come down and visit us in South Florida. You'll see wild iguanas and all kinds of great things this time of year.
It's a very mindful experience.
It's very mindful. You will see many of things that will pull you into the present moment. Y'all, thanks for being here. As always, we love a rate. We love a review. We love a comment. Feedback is great. And we'll see y'all next week right here on Drop In.
Bye.
Bye.